Welcome to the Right Academy. I'm Matthew Miller. A lot of people ask, how do I start a book? I've got this idea I want to write. I don't know how to start. First thing to remember, though, is that writing is a physical process. Whether you write by hand, by typing, it's physical work. It's something you do. A lot of people have great ideas. That's fine, but they never put them on paper, never do the work. And so that doesn't make you a writer. What makes you a writer is writing. Seems self evident, but it's something that a lot of people don't think about. So, there's different styles of literature that have been many different popular types of books throughout the ages. If you were to ask, say, Charles Dickens, how do you start a novel? He would have answered quite differently than how I'm going to answer you today. That's because readers have different expectations. Now, if you're writing for the sake of art, for the sake of yourself, start it however you want. If you want to sell your book, you have to start it in a way that's going to attract readers, right? That's the long-standing tension between creativity, art, and making a living. So if you want people to read your book, you're going to have to grab them from the start. That's what modern readers want. They want action. They want it to start immediately. That's not all they want, but they want that. So when you start your book, the big thing to remember is that you need to, from the very first sentence, the very first word, grab the reader's attention. Otherwise, they're going to close it, put it down, turn off the Kindle, and find something else. Okay. Now, here's some things to remember. Chapter 1. You need a character. I suggest that it be your main character. That's the easiest way. You have to think about this character. Don't just start writing. Think about it a little bit. What is this character's background? What is their personality, their physical appearance, their gender, their backstory, their family? Where are they from? How have these things affected them? What is their strength? What is their flaw? Because characters need strengths and flaws. A completely character with complete strengths and no flaws is unbelievable and boring. A character with all flaws and no strengths, I guess, would also be unbelievable and boring. But remember the hero's journey. If you've watched those videos, we've talked about the hero's journey. You need to start with a normal person who can do extraordinary things. Make them the underdog. So start with this. Now, that's number one, character. Number two, you need a setting. You need an interesting setting. But the setting doesn't only need to be interesting, it also needs to be a part of the chapter. It needs to be there for a reason. In other words, don't drop a character into a random setting generator and say, okay, there they are. The setting needs to be a part of the story. There needs to be a reason in the story, in the chapter, why the character is there. Okay? Remember, you want to grab the reader's attention. That setting needs to be a part of it. It needs to be a reason it's there so that whatever the character does in the first chapter, whatever happens, should be intimately related to that setting. Now, you should describe the setting briefly. Different writers have different ways of describing things. You should have some description so the reader knows where they are. Each part of that setting needs to matter. In other words, don't go off on this wild tangent of description about this room when 90% of the things you say, I'd say room as an example, 90% of the things you say have nothing to do with the story. It might be beautiful description, it might be beautiful prose, but the modern reader is going to close the book. Okay, so describe only what it relates to the chapter. Number 3, in media res. Have you heard this? In media res, it means in the middle of the thing. This means that you need to start off with your character in the middle of something happening. Don't just say, there was a man whose name was John. John was 6 feet tall. John was a professional criminal. John was a good person. Don't just describe John. Have something happen. Compare that to something like this. This is off the top of my head. John was hanging on the edge of the building by his fingertips. He looked up at the man above him holding the gun, looked down and saw the pavement 1,000 feet below. More exciting, right? More interesting. John, something exciting's happening. John's in a predicament. Okay, and the reader wants to know how they're going to get out. How did John get in that situation? Is John the good guy or the bad guy? What's happening here? Start off, number 4, with your character in peril, like the example I just gave. The Harry Potter books, I like them. I think the plot is ingenious. I think the characters are great, but I don't think the writing's all that good. I think it starts off the wrong way. All was quiet on Privet Street or whatever. And she goes on to this long description instead of having something happen immediately. That's just my opinion. But obviously, Harry Potter did pretty damn well. But the writing itself in the first chapter is not great, in my opinion. The character needs to start off in peril. Put them in peril. Put them in a situation. Have them hanging off the edge of that building. have them being chased, have them in a fight, have them solving a mystery, have them holding up a museum and being caught, anything like that. Okay. Number five, you need to have the character act in character. What I mean by that is you need to know who the character is. They need to act as that person would act in reality. Okay. Doesn't mean the situation has to be real. You can write fantasy, horror, supernatural, whatever, werewolf, fairies, or you can make it real. It doesn't matter. The point is that the character should act as that character you've designed would act in that situation. Finally, number six, I would say leave it on a cliffhanger. Leave that first chapter at a cliffhanger. Don't resolve it. Leave it on a cliffhanger. The next chapter you can start many different ways. We'll talk about that later. But leave the reader wondering, what's going to happen next? So they'll turn that page. I highly recommend calling chapter one, or whatever you name it. Don't call it a prologue. The reason is that most people don't read prologues. Most people flip through the prologue. They think, that's not really important. So you need to make it chapter one so the reader will read it. Now, if you number your chapters, 1, 2, 3, or if you name them, whatever, have that as the first chapter, not as a prologue. Those are some ideas, some thoughts that I find help me. It's not the only way to start a book, but it is a great way to grab readers' attention. If you want to appeal to the modern reader and sell copies, remember those steps. You have to have a great character with a great background. You need to have a good setting that relates. Start in the middle of an action. Put the character in peril. Have the character act as they normally would act, that person. And 6, end on a cliffhanger. So I hope that helps. If you like the video, please like and subscribe. You've been watching the Write Right Academy with Matthew Miller.